So I went to South Africa, and I spent a year there facilitating interracial team building for lots of companies there from South Africa, mining groups of all different mines across South Africa. And Nelson Mandela had just been released from prison. And so a lot was changing in the country. And they would come, the groups from the different work groups were trying to integrate together. And yet they still slept in different rooms. They slept 8 different tables and drank differently together. And so they would have this experience with me for 8 days, belaying each other up rock climbs, crossing swamps together, hiking and climbing and all kinds of things, and really discover a lot of their commonalities. And some of the things I certainly identified with, I loved the rich culture there, but I also found over time that I had a lot in common with the white men there. And those white men in South Africa, whether Afrikaans or British South African, and often are demonized as the perpetrators of apartheid. And on an individual basis, I found that they were just like me, pretty good guys. And what that intrigued me to say is, yeah, and knowing my background, growing up in the Midwest, and what I didn't know about around race and gender and how things play out subtly, I want to go back to the US and work with people that look like me, other white men. And that was partly selfish, because I wanted to know what's the next step for my learning journey. And so I did a dissertation about how do white men learn about diversity. And so I studied the journeys of these 8 white men who are known nationally for being strong advocates. What triggered their awareness? What triggered their learning, their insights, and their decision to be kind of active as a big part of their life around this topic. And a couple of things I found. One was that they learned almost everything from white women and men and women of color, and never turned to other white men. In fact, actually kind of disconnected from other white men in their support networks. And I thought that was really interesting. And I went to a conference, a national conference, and I was presenting the results, and I talked about that. I said about how we learn everything from women and people of color, and this woman of color raised her hand, and she said, if that's the pathway to diversity for white men, then I'm exhausted, because I don't have the energy to educate all of you. And, and she was right. It's a fatiguing, exhausting role that she ends up in. And so I thought, how do we get each other to look at this together as white men? That's the missing piece in this whole equation.